One thing we'll leave with is this knowledge-based view of concepts and categories. The idea of a knowledge-based view is that a person classifying objects and events doesn't just compare the features or the aspects. Instead, the person uses their knowledge of how the concept is organized to justify that classification, and this may explain why certain instances happen to go together in the same category. And she gives a clever example here. I really appreciate this level of depth. Take this example, comprising children, pets, photo albums, and cash. On the face of it, these things don't go together well, but in the context where there's a fire about to consume a house, then of course we'd rescue the children and pets first, plus the most valuable trinkets. So we know that each object mentioned is precious to its owner or parents, and they're irreplaceable. But you'll notice that the category becomes coherent only when it has a purpose, not generally speaking. So a similar context effect arises when concepts are combined. Here's an example. If I ask you to think of pets, you'll think of dogs and cats. If you think of fish, you might think of trout or salmon. But if you think of pet fish, of course, we only think of goldfish and maybe just a couple others. We wouldn't have a trout or a salmon as a pet. So particular contexts can make concepts be refracted through them, and we have a completely different idea of how things may go together. So Medine offered this psychological essentialism. Underlying nature makes something what it is that can be predicted from surface traits. So a gorilla has a fur torso. The great majority of men have short hair and women long hair. In other words, there's something essential about that. What's essential about the appearance of a gorilla? It tends to walk on all fours. It has a very, very large torso compared to its lower legs. Now, you could say that may be some form of sexism to make generalizations about the two major genders. But if you consider just the two major genders that we simplify to sometimes, isn't it true that there's some benefit for making a generalization? As you walk around campus on Monday, March 18th, what percentage of men have short hair? It's got to be 95%, maybe 97%. What percentage of women have long hair in the same neighborhood? I mean, conservatively, 38 out of every 40 people conform with gender norms on that basic dimension. So it pays to some degree to have some emergent essentialism for a category, and that's knowledge-based. Whether that's sexist or not, I hope it isn't. I think it's a fairly benign statement. But I really think generalizations can be made about the two major genders, although I know we don't really categorize that way now. So people's knowledge of the essence of a category varies by level of expertise. Biologists in general know a lot more about genetic structure, and we may see that doctors can tell the difference between a serious tick bite and one that can be treated fairly easily. They have a lot of expertise in that. They can discern something serious from something that isn't. So when the situation calls for it, and if the expertise is possessed, people classify on the basis of deeper principles. So this suggestion implies then that people's classification of instances will change as they become more experienced. So for instance, can a doctor tell right away, based on symptoms and based on what they observe of you, of whether your cold could be COVID or is unlikely to be? As I understand it, a COVID is a dry cough. You cough a lot, but you can't produce any volume from your lungs, and it's very frustrating. That's one indication. Another thing that he or she may weigh is the presence of fever, of just sort of a subdued feeling. There may be a half dozen things that they observe right away that suggest it's COVID, besides the test. So they become discerning in that way based on knowledge and experience. So there are a few different kinds of concepts: nominal kind concepts, clear definitions like a triangle, natural kind concepts that occur only in an environment, and artifact concepts serves a purpose like a hammer or a thumb drive. So over the years, a thumb drive has become something that is emerged as an artifact concept. I don't remember when the first thumb drives were available for sale. It might have been 2005. So that's 20 years ago, but it's something that emerged over time to replace what we used to use, which was floppy disks that held very little in terms of file space. So one last thing, Komatsu defined a different sort of approach to concepts, which he called explanation-based. comprising some Scripps view and some knowledge-based view. In this approach to the study of concepts, people are seeing as basing classifications on relationships among instances and categories. The contrast between the similarity-based and explanation-based approaches has to do with the degree to which people focus on superficial perceptual information about a particular object versus the degree to which they focus on deeper knowledge derived about an object's function or role. So it's sort of a hybrid between those two. But you could argue, on the other hand, that superficiality can get you a long way in determining things, although that may lead to prejudice and may lead to other things that are not favored. Sometimes it is profitable to generalize. I think we can generalize that if you're speaking only of two genders, that women almost exclusively wear their hair long and men almost exclusively their hair short. And I would challenge you, next time you're just out and about in public, figure out what percentage of fellas you see with long hair and women with short. It's remarkably few. It's amazing how closely we adhere to that gender norm among the two genders.